Next, a national conference on food safety. Speaking first on the topic, Agriculture Secretary Ann Venomen. Following her remarks, you'll hear a panel discussion on food safety regulations in the Bush administration. Participants include representatives of the Consumer Federation of America, the National Food Processors Association, and the Chief of Staff to Agriculture Secretary Venomen. This conference took place today at the National Press Club here in Washington. It's about an hour and a half.
Excuse me if I could have your attention. Our lunch speaker is making her way to the front of the room. To introduce our lunch speaker today, let me recognize Carol Tucker Foreman. She is Director of the Consumer Federation of America's Food Policy Institute. Carol returned to CFA 2 years ago after 2 decades in government and as head of her own consulting firm. She's had a major impact on U.S. diet and health for more than 25 years. Carol?
Thank you. And welcome to Consumer Federation of America's 24th National Food Policy Conference. Ann Venomen is the 27th and the 1st. The 27th Secretary of Agriculture and the 1st Secretary of Agriculture who is a woman. It's about time, you know. Women, more than any other industry in the world, women have played an equal role in agriculture. Through history, they've been out there plowing the fields and planting and reaping alongside men. And I got to tell you that the title, Madam Secretary, sounds very sweet to me. This is, however, not Secretary Venomen's first trip to the United States Department of Agriculture. She's the classic case of having worked her way up to this position. She started as Associate Administrator of the Agricultural Marketing Service, then served as Deputy Undersecretary for International Programs, International Affairs and Commodity Programs, and finally as Deputy Secretary, the department's #2 position. Then for 4 years, she prepped for her present job by serving as Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture, where I will tell you she earned the enthusiastic respect of the California consumer community. Secretary Venomen was raised on a peach farm in Modesto, California, earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of California at Davis, a Master's in Public Policy from UC Berkeley, and a JD from UC Hastings College of Law. Madam Secretary, there is an ancient adage, I'm not sure whether it's a blessing or a curse, about living in interesting times. You have certainly come back to Washington at an interesting time for food and agriculture. Mad cow disease, foot and mouth disease, falling food prices, rising energy prices. You may actually wonder why it is that you came back and why all of these things have been happening. Well, I have a theory about that. It is that God decided that she would save all of these problems until there was a competent woman to solve them.
Thank you very much, Carol, for that very kind introduction. I must say that's one of the more unusual introductions I've had, but I do appreciate it. I do welcome the opportunity to speak here at this important conference. I understand this is an annual event and one that I think is important for bringing people together from various points of view to discuss common concerns about improving our food supply as well as public health. I think this coming together fits in with the new tone that President Bush has brought to Washington. And I can say I just came, the reason I didn't have lunch with you is I was over at the White House where he invited all the 535 members of Congress and the cabinet together to celebrate the 100 days mark of his administration. In that 100-day period, the President has developed an innovative and ambitious agenda to move America forward. He's advancing a tax package to stimulate our economy and provide tax relief to all American taxpayers. He's working with Congress on landmark reform education policy that, when implemented, will ensure that no child is left behind. And this administration has submitted a budget that sets priorities, funds important programs, and provides for the future while maintaining fiscal responsibility. The President's approach is focused on cooperation to achieve results, and that is a concept that I think we want to carry forward in the Department of Agriculture as well. I've also reached my 100 days at USDA. I have to tell you that given some of the issues that Carol was just telling you about, sometimes it seems like I've been there 100 years. But we have had all of the challenging issues to address, whether it's foot and mouth disease, BSE, starling corn, food safety issues, energy issues. With each of these issues, we've tried to make sound policy decisions based on the best available science, common sense approaches with all interested parties having a seat at the table. This approach helps us to find common ground and forge sound solutions to sometimes very difficult issues. We at USDA have submitted a budget plan that fully funds essential plant and animal health disease protection programs, and also provides increased funding for programs that benefit consumers such as food safety, WIC, food stamps, and child nutrition. As it relates to plant and animal disease protection, I want to briefly talk for a moment about foot and mouth disease because it is the topic that has captured the headlines so much in the last few weeks. We are taking the necessary actions to keep this devastating livestock disease out of the United States. We've stepped up our border controls and our traveler inspections. We've prohibited the movement of animals and products to the U.S. from affected countries. We continue to do a top-to-bottom review of our programs with two goals in mind. First, to prevent foot and mouth disease from entering our country, and second, to be prepared in the unfortunate event that we face such an emergency, that we'll have the resources necessary to eradicate it quickly. These protections have worked for more than 72 years, and with the help of both our federal and our state partners, we will continue our vigilance. I will add again, as I like to remind people, that this disease is not a food safety issue for humans. It is a devastating livestock disease. When I was preparing today for today's remarks, I looked at the theme for your conference, Consumers, Food Policy, and Food Politics in a Global Area. And as I looked down the list of the kinds of issues that the various panels are addressing, I was struck with one common theme in many of these issues, and that is change. We are in a time of great change. Today, the links of the food chain are more interconnected than they have ever been before. Our food system operates in a global, high-tech, consumer-driven environment. Capital and information are flowing constantly between buyer and seller, and changing consumer demands are challenging existing marketing institutions and traditional ways of doing business. In today's consumer-driven food system, demand drives supply rather than supply driving demand. Recently, I was reading an issue of Time magazine, and when you talk about change, this particular issue had a chart in it that I think really illustrates the kind of change we're going through today. This lays out the amount of time needed for the sum total of humankind's knowledge to double. From 1750 to 1900, it took 150 years. From 1900 to 1950, 50 years. From 1950 to 1960, 10 years. From 60 to 65, 5 years. By the year 2020, it is anticipated, according to this article, that the amount of time needed for the sum total of humankind's knowledge to double will be 73 days. There was a recent quote I read in The Economist magazine that caught my attention. It said, "Everything that can be invented has been invented." With these sweeping words, the Commissioner of the U.S. Office of Patents recommended in 1899 that his office be abolished, so spectacular had been the wave of innovation in the late 19th century. Some have proclaimed the internet as the greatest invention since the wheel, transforming the world so rapidly that old economies and textbooks need ripping up. Roughly 10 years ago, there were about 50 pages on the World Wide Web. Today, there are over 500 million. 10 years ago, no one had ever heard of e-commerce. Today, retail e-commerce in the U.S. is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Of course, skeptics will say that computers and the internet are not remotely as important as steam power, telegraph, or electricity. In their view, IT stands for insignificant toys. The fact is, though, that technology is transforming every part of the economy and every part of the food chain. It's revolutionizing production agriculture as new precision farming tools are rapidly coming to market, which are creating fundamental changes in the way production is done. It's creating more efficiencies and increasing productive capacity. Water use efficiencies are coming from new irrigation technologies, with many of the technologies bringing a number of environmental benefits. You can now use computer chips to track the records of individual livestock on a per-day basis. Various new technologies give growers the opportunity to collect information as it operates tractors and other farm equipment in the field. You can already gather topographical information, which can be used to construct contour maps for leveling and farm management. And over time, we will find ways to reap the harvest of all of the available information to give growers the basis upon which to make more informed decisions. Consumer demand for convenience in their food products has created a new industry called the fresh processed industry, which has really been brought about by the new technology in packaging. Just think about it. 10 years ago, we never thought about buying salad in a bag. Today, probably most of you do. The baby carrot industry was developed because of new packaging and the ability to put this convenient food in small bags. And now we have pre-sliced apples that, due to the packaging technology, can stay sliced and not turn brown for up to 3 weeks. Technology is also revolutionizing scientific discovery and research, which is having a tremendous impact on the food chain. It's changing the basic nature of scientific methodology and systems that effectively evaluate science. The ability to combine genetics with super powerful computers instantly produces all genetic options. What used to take a matter of years of experimentation now takes only weeks. It allows us to create revolutionary new products that leap over complex problems and take opportunities to new heights. And as medical and agriculture biotechnology begin to come together, consumers will benefit from nutraceuticals and functional foods and from pharmaceuticals that are produced from agriculture. You hear about these biomedicals, plants and animals that are producing health-enhancing benefits. They're now looking at cancer cures from none other than the tobacco plant. Livestock is now being milked for certain enzymes to be used in pharmaceuticals. And as the consumer sees the health benefit to the consumer, it's my view that this will also help with consumer acceptance of some of these new products. Other research, including the Human Genome Project and other genomic mapping discoveries, will give great potential to create solutions to numerous problems: health solutions, pest and disease problems, and controls. There is, at UC Davis, one of my alma maters, a new genomic research center that is being planned. It's being established in the medical school, with the vet school, and the ag school, all a part of this genomics center, as well as the USDA Nutrition Center, so that all of these disciplines can come together to look at new opportunities for advanced science, for health, and a variety of other issues. Not only can technology help feed populations around the globe, it can also help to address food safety issues. Again, packaging technology has been developed which has spoilage warnings for meat and fish. And just recently, I was reading an article about some scientists that have decoded the genome of a deadly strain of E. coli bacteria that should aid in the development of diagnostic tests and treatments. The DNA for E. coli 0157H7 contains blueprints for a host of biological machinery that harms the human intestines. And a U.S. beef packing company has licensed the commercial development rights for a component of cow's milk that has the potential for combating E. coli and other microbes, including Salmonella and Campylobacter. These advances and potential solutions to larger food safety issues help underscore the need for continued research and new thinking when it comes to the use of technology in today's changing food system. As we move forward, our approach to food safety will be based on some important principles, which I laid out in a speech a couple of weeks ago on food safety, but I just want to briefly reiterate them. We will work to build consumer and industry coalitions that strengthen the protection systems already in place. Public health decisions will be based on common sense approaches utilizing the best available science. We will seek out public and private research to help forge solutions and anticipate issues and needs. We will bring all interested parties to the table for real dialogue to forge effective policy. We will continue to promote public-private partnerships that reward the innovators and problem solvers. And we will strengthen public education efforts that work with all aspects of the food chain to ensure safety and proper food handling. Protecting our food supply and strengthening our regulatory systems is a top priority of this administration. We want to ensure that our food supply, one of the safest in the world, is supported through sound policy, rigorous enforcement, cooperation, and public education. Our systems must be flexible, adaptable, and science-driven. Only then will we strengthen consumer confidence during these changing times that bring us new opportunities and new challenges every day. Change will continue to be driven by consumer demand and advances in science and technology. Only through innovation will we continue to lead the world on these important issues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Maybe a couple of questions. The secretary's agreed to stay and take a few questions. If anybody's got one, or did she answer all of them? Caroline?
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Venomen. Your department has done a really excellent job at keeping both mad cow disease and foot and mouth so far out of the U.S. I think you deserve, and your department deserves, tremendous credit for the focus that you've had on animal diseases, going back really for decades, but with respect to BSE since 1989. We continue to live with hazards that don't make the animals sick. Things like Campylobacter, Salmonella, Listeria, 015787, a strain of E. coli. So I'm glad to hear that you're planning initiatives to continue making strides to improve food safety. My question is, as part of the APHIS program, they also control plant diseases that have the potential to come in and spread in this country. And it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we have border inspectors at almost every airport where they might be shipping food to the U.S. to check for plant diseases. Unfortunately, we don't have a similar system checking fruits and vegetables coming into our consumers for human hazards that might be on them. And we've had major outbreaks from parasites showing up on berries and from other hazards. Is there a way to marry the systems so that we have the same protections that are given to prevent animal diseases are also being used to prevent human hazards on the food supply? Thank you.
Okay, that was a long question. There's a couple of things I think we should point out. And one of the things that you brought up I think is very important, and that is that we've seen a number of emerging pathogens in recent years. When I left USDA 8 years ago, we were not talking about any of these emerging pathogens, and they are important that we continue to address them, recognize that they are different, and also continue to do research to address these kinds of issues, because they are new and relatively recently emerging issues. With regard to the inspections with airports and ports and so forth, USDA, through the APHIS, does have a rigorous program to inspect for food coming illegally into this country. And as you indicated, that is primarily to ensure that we do not get plant and animal pests and diseases. Obviously, for a number of years, we've heard about medfly problems, and that's certainly something we dealt with out in California. We have now reviewed all of our programs with particular emphasis on what is needed to keep out, particularly foot and mouth disease, because of the tremendous impact of the outbreak we've seen in Europe. FDA does have responsibility for looking at product that comes over our border with regard to pesticide residues and that kind of thing. It's my understanding that they've continued to look at additional inspectors. I think they've asked for a number of them in the budget this year. But as you know, all product that comes into the U.S. is required to meet U.S. standards with regard to residues and so forth.
Another, yes, sir.
I'm Steve Love with Inside U.S. Trade. The EU recently appears to have stepped up its pressure to have the U.S. adopt a regional approach to foot and mouth disease. I'm wondering what your response has been to them recently about this, and have they also reiterated their threat to possibly seek a WTO challenge?
Well, obviously, regionalization is a concept that has been supported, all over the world in terms of how we deal with these issues. As you know, a number of the countries in the EU do not have any sign of foot and mouth disease whatsoever. We have continually been reviewing the ban that we put on the entire EU since the outbreak actually spread to further in Europe after it was first detected in the UK. And we are continuing to review that. We're asking for information and constantly looking at whether or not we can at least exempt some of the countries that aren't experiencing the foot and mouth disease problem. Regionalization is important too, because if anything were to ever happen in this country, say on the tip of Florida, you wouldn't want the entire country to be excluded from participating in the global marketplace. We saw a quick reaction when we had the carnal bunt disease in wheat a few years back, that this country very quickly was able to isolate regions, protect those regions, and then resume our shipping to the rest of the country. So I think the whole concept of regionalization is an important one, and it's certainly an issue that we're continuing to review with regard to the European Union at this point and the foot and mouth disease restrictions.
Yes, Irene.
I'm curious what role you see in the future for the general consumer education and research that's done by cooperative extension and the experiment stations.
Good question. In California, when we were out there with the department out there, we made education a real priority in several respects. First of all, just in terms of most people today think that you go to the grocery store, you buy a carton of milk, and it just comes that way. They don't realize how it gets there. And so we did a lot of work with schools, with internet programs, and California has a very strong Ag in the Classroom program to help to educate particularly school children about where their food comes from and the importance of agriculture and farming. We also, because of the number of food safety issues that we dealt with, really stepped up education in terms of safe food handling. I even went on public television at one point and cooked Christmas dinner, emphasizing the need to wash, the cutting surfaces and so forth. But we did a number of things like that, and I think that one of the problems that we've had today is that the general consumer is given food that's so well prepared, so advanced in its preparation that they don't know food handling good practices anymore. And I think we have a role in terms of consumer education in that regard as well. And as you ask about extension clearly has an important role to play in all of these education efforts. They were traditionally founded to help farmers adapt to new advances and so forth. But the Extension Service has expanded in scope over the last many years. And one of the areas that it has been proactive in is consumer education.
Any more questions there? Yes.
One way
Madam
over back
Secretary.
there.
Thank you.
Duke Seabour with the Food Safety Report, BNA.
I used to get that. It's very good.
Does the education effort extend also to process